Hello and welcome to a classic Cut Through the Noise episode. Over the next couple of weeks during the summer, we are working behind the scenes on bringing some new and exciting developments to Cut Through the Noise. So in the meantime, let's check in with some of our most popular episodes of Cut Through the Noise since we launched over 2.5 years ago. I hope you enjoy the series. Welcome to Cut Through the Noise with me, Aisling O'Rourke, a podcast for business leaders who want to increase sales and elevate your brand through impactful communications. Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Here on Cut Through the Noise, we don't just talk theory, we deliver actionable results that can help you connect with your audience and grow your business at the same time. Now, today we are focusing in on the power of storytelling from a business perspective. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll know it's something that I am passionate about. I am very excited by our guest this week. I am joined by, well, let's just say podcast producer extraordinaire, Lochlainn Harte, multi-award winning at this point, Lochlainn. Too many awards to mention them all. You're very welcome to the podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. This is great.
So before we get into the nitty gritty, Lochlainn, how did you get into the podcast production side of things? What was it that captured your attention?
So I think I may have been involved in one of the very first podcasts ever made in Ireland, I'd say over 20 years ago. It would have been one of the first ones anyway. So I worked with a guy called Dusty Rhodes, and he runs the Dust Pod. And we had got sponsorship from Jägermeister to create something kind of different. And we had hired 2 new guys to come in. And this wasn't for radio broadcast. It was for originally YouTube. So we got 2 guys in every week, and we just created kind of, non-BAI regulated audio content that could just live online. Now, there were no RSS feeds or anything like that available at that stage. It was really brand new territory. But we could just kind of be free with it, and we weren't bound by time or anything like that. And at the time, I was head of production for his independent production house, but it was mainly radio we worked with, and they were all bound by specific time limits. We had 45 minutes maybe per show, 12-minute segments here and there. So I think from a very early start in my career, I saw the power of podcasting in its kind of unlimited capacity. So that's how it kind of inspired me to kind of stick with it. And then my career kind of fell down into kind of the radio world, and I've been there most of my career, but I mainly worked on radio imaging and radio documentaries. And then when I went for my interview with News Talk, I was into FM at the time, and I had just had a real passion to create, because I knew News Talk had so much content, but their podcasts were just rehashed radio shows, and they have so many amazing journalists there and producers. And I went for my interview, and I said to the CEO and the PD, or the editor of News Talk at the time, I said, look, the imaging side of things, fine. I think that's the easy part of the job, and dealing with sponsors and things like that. But there's an opportunity there to create amazing podcasts because as I just said, the producers and the journalists that are there. And I said, if we don't have a number 1 podcast by December, by the end of the year, I'm happy to renegotiate my salary or whatever. I said, just give me the opportunity. So on my very first day of News Talk, the first episode of Inside the Crime landed on my desk, and Patricia Monaghan, my boss at the time, was, there you go. It's in your hands now. See what you can do. And I swear I've never clicked with people faster than I did in that project. Frank Graney and Aisling Moore, the 3 of us just somehow understood every word we were saying to each other and trusted each other. And sure enough, then in December of that year, we had a News Talk's first number 1 podcast under our belt. So that's kind of how I deep dived into the bigger, longer series formats. And so it's been a short enough journey in that sense. And I've helped people maybe create jingles here and there for their shows and maybe clean up a bit of audio for them. But it's only been maybe 4 years in total, 5 years maybe, of deep podcast and editing and production.
And in fairness, in the podcast world, that's quite a long time, really, particularly in Ireland, because, you know, my background's in radio as well. And I think in radio in Ireland in particular, there was a reticence against podcasting to begin with, because, you know, stations, and understandably, were afraid of giving away their content effectively for free, even though the consumer doesn't pay for radio programming. We just tune in and to whatever station we want. But for podcasting, there was that slow bubble. And then all of a sudden, the past 2-3 years, podcasting in Ireland has just exploded. And you mentioned Aisling Moore and Frank Graney there, and I have the pleasure of having worked with both. And like, if you haven't listened to Inside the Crime, you have to. It's an amazing series, and I do hope that it continues. But on like putting all of this together, and, you know, whether it's a jingle for a show or working with a sponsor, it can be challenging for someone running their business. Maybe they're trying to delve into the marketing side and get into the whole podcast sponsoring side. It can be hard to know, well, how to make the introduction and all of that, but also then, right, I've got this business, what do I want them to say about me? And storytelling is massively important here. Where do you come from on the storytelling side of things? Like, obviously in Ireland, we're really good at it. But how do you work to craft that narrative, say, with a client or a fellow producer?
So I kind of weirdly, like, there's a lot of studios that will sit down and, let's say, I'll start at the end and then work my way back possibly here. So when it comes to the voicing side of things, a lot of people kind of tend to, like, because you have unlimited takes, basically, because it's pre-production, a lot of people will overproduce themselves and listen back and like, oh no, I'll change that. And it loses all authenticity whatsoever. And I've kind of had the pleasure of working with some amazing voiceover artists that were called one take wonders, that would just, the first version of it is the most honest version, and it's the least overproduced sell version. So I love honest voiceover. Even if there's slight mistakes and fluffs here and there, I actually don't mind that. It feels a bit more human, because you listen to all your AI voiceovers now, they're all perfect, pinpoint, clear, crystal. So there's the way around that is to have a bit of a flaw in there. And there's no harm in, you know, a bit of honesty there. And I love that. You know, it doesn't have to be pristine and perfect. It just has to be authentic, especially for businesses. You know, it all comes down to trust. And, you know, once you lose, like, you have a few minutes, if not a few seconds, to like hold your listener. And once they get bored, they could easily switch off to another one that they like. Certain people that may have had full-on careers, and then all of a sudden they get into the podcasting world and they're free and they just become more of themselves, and then they just skyrocket. It's amazing to watch. So that side of things I love in terms of voicing. And then in terms of script writing, thankfully I don't have to do a whole lot of script writing, which is great. But when I did have to do, I had to do a podcast of my own recently called Corny, which went on to win awards and stuff for producing. But within that, again, I tried to remove, like, throughout that, there actually is no narrator in that podcast whatsoever, which is the hardest thing in the world to do. So you have to craft all your questions as an interviewee. So you may not be comfortable on the mic. I'm far from comfortable on the mic. I hate my own voice. B, I hate hearing my own voice. C, I don't like scripting myself. I don't like reading on. That's why I got into production, because I'm scared of the microphone, basically. So if you're in that world, it's okay, because you can create crazy, compelling, award-winning stuff with no narrator as well. So as long as you craft your questions really carefully, you can take all the answers and you can blend them all together to tell the whole story that you want to tell without ever having to ask one question on the finished product. So within Corny, there's no questions whatsoever being asked in that documentary series. It's just a series of storytellers telling it as raw as anything. And like, when my creative brain just tends to go places here. So when I was making that documentary, actually, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was interviewing his brother, this guy Corny. He was an NFL player, and I was down in Wicklow interviewing his brother. And I didn't realize it, but the guy Corney had said to his brother, he said, look, just check out Lochlainn, let him come down to your house and just see if he's legit, if he's doing this for the right reason. Yeah, because he'd never told his full story before, and he's 70 years old, and he was like, if he's legit, then let's talk, but if not, he's might just be another sports journal trying to get a few headlines here and there. So I sat down with his brother Coley, and I'd say an hour and a half passed before we even opened the microphone. We just clicked, and we were just having coffee and chats, and eventually we both looked at each other and we're like, oh, we're meant to be recording here. And I didn't realize at the time, but he had agreed in his head that this guy's the real deal. So we started recording, and the morning after the recording, we were at 7 a.m. we were due to fly out. Me and my wife and my son were due to fly out on holidays, and I was only meant to go down here for 1 hour, and I would say about 4 or 5 hours had passed, and I hadn't picked up my phone, and it was about 1 a.m. and the conversation was just so authentic, and I just couldn't break it. I had to let him talk and talk, and then at the end of the interview, I looked at my phone, and I must have had 20 missed calls, 30 messages saying like, where are you? Are you okay? What's happened? We haven't packed yet.
I can only imagine the stress at home.
Yeah, and I was still about 45 minutes away, so I had to still drive back. But in hindsight, it was just, the moment was too good to pass. I don't think I could have recaptured that or planned it. So sometimes over planning can kind of affect your kind of authenticity as well. I love, like, there's certain interviewers that just let people talk, and you can edit it afterwards. You don't have to, like, I'm guessing half of this could be cut for all I know, but I love just letting people talk and talk and talk, because that's where you find the little golden nuggets, because they'll have told their story 100 times, but as long as you kind of let them talk and just keep egging them on.
And it's, and I think once you've hooked the listener in, that's it, they're yours. They keep going. They're fascinating. Even just hearing your side of things, it is really interesting. But the key, and like, let's be honest, we live in an attention economy. Businesses, they thrive or fail based on the amount of attention they can capture. How do you, particularly with audio, capture the listener's attention when they have so much choice?
So yeah, love that question. I weirdly love movie trailers. I'm just mad about movie trailers. There was one movie trailer that just captured me so well, and there's nothing said in it. It's the movie Prometheus, and it just had this really strange sound that just would flash and repeat, and it was a kind of like, if you watch the trends in Hollywood trailers, they kind of change over the years, and Prometheus just developed this kind of new style of trailer where it was just this really weird sound that would repeat and loop, and it would just flash images on the screen. It's still a trend now, but they were one of the first to do it at the time. And then I was like, how do you boil down like a 3-hour movie into, they have 10-second bites, 15-second bites, 30-second bites, and not tell the story, but just to capture the listener or capture the viewer as well. So my whole career, I've always tried to recreate my promos and my snippets with that Hollywood style in mind. So when it came to Inside the Crime, for example, News Talk was so used to, having, an intro saying Inside the Crime, and then just a music bed, and then, this is where you find it. And I was like,
yeah, the kind of the stock way of doing
standard. Yeah. And I was like, can you just let me create something that isn't News Talk that will stand out? So we got this movie trailer sound. It's really intense, dark, heavy, full on Hollywood sound, which doesn't really match the rest of the style of the podcast. It's real kind of compassionate sounding stuff. They're really intimate. So I created the podcast, and straight away you could just feel other people's goosebumps. They were like, oh wow, this is a real story. Like, so I think putting your production into your ads or promos, like, I won't say I'm against it, but I think, when you buy your stock adverts through a radio station, their intention is, trying to cut costs as much as possible and then, get it on air as soon as possible, but make sure the client's a bit happy. But I think like it's really worth investing in like serious creativity in those areas. Like Radio Centre Ireland do the audio awards every year for radio ads and things like that. And just listening to some of the creative productions are phenomenal, and they really stand out, and they can really see the benefit of a real standout ad, because there are thousands of ads out there and they have to stand out. And I always think the sign of a good ad is forgetting what the ad was before it. In terms of, advertising, selling yourself, that I think is a really powerful one. But then a lot of people create a podcast and just jump straight in, and they'll be like, oh, here's the podcast, here we go. And that can be fine for an established podcast. But I think for someone new, it's definitely worth, I love bespoke intros. Like you look at Diary of a CEO, not the biggest fan of the podcast anyway, but I do enjoy how they do that kind of X factor, like here's the guest, here's all their clips, and it shows A, high level of production, and B, it just gives you a bit more background. Okay, because a lot of guests that come on, like you haven't a clue who they are sometimes, but this gives you a very quick background, insight, exciting, holds you. Like they have a guy whose sole job is to create those. That's his full-time job, is to create intros for the podcast, not edit the rest of the podcast, just create promos for the podcast. Those little headline moments are so important. A lot of people forget. Like you really need to grab your listener in the first 30 seconds. And audio quality is a big deal for me. There's so many tools out there that can just, re-enhance audio to make it a bit more studio quality. A lot of them are free as well. So, understanding those. I do think having an editor is really important, especially for the bigger drama stuff. You might be an amazing producer, but when it comes to, cleaning up audio, pacing, flow, music, emotion, sound effects, ambience, all these layers upon layers upon layers that the audience don't really hear because it's kind of subconscious. It should all just sound like one piece. They can really take a podcast from a good one to like an award-winning podcast in my eyes.
And it cannot be underestimated, the value of a good producer, a good editor, and setting out your expectations, doing a bit of research beforehand and being able to say, well, actually, I really liked this and how they did this here, but this I don't like and I don't want. And it's really important that if you're hiring somebody to do, well, quite frankly, anything, that you really communicate clearly your expectations on that side of things. Now, we've talked about your career in Ireland, in the radio sector, and now you're branching out on your own and you're moving country. So why? How are you deciding to set up your own business?
So it all came about very suddenly. Like I was in News Talk and I absolutely loved it there. And my wife is a doctor, so she was moving back to Donegal for 6 months. So we were living in Dublin, and she was moving back to Donegal for 6 months to do almost kind of like cover consultancy work, but it was full time. So in our heads, we were moving back there anyway. And then I had talked to News Talk about remote work, and we were in kind of negotiations about it. And then she applied for a fellowship in Australia that in her wildest dreams she didn't think she could get, because it's really highly sought after. And then she was coming off nights one morning. We always used to meet for coffee in the morning because we'd be like ships in the night. And she sat down and she's like, I just got offered Australia. And I was on my way into work, and she's like, what should we do? I was like, well, I'm going to go in and quit, and we're going to plan towards, being successful over there for as long as we can. So I ended up going into Patricia again and saying, look, I know we've been in negotiations, but and she couldn't be nicer about it. Little did I know that she was leaving herself to go to RTE. She's now the director of audio in RTE. So I was hoping for a big fight, that she would want to keep me and this, that, and the other, but she'd already had her negotiations as well that nobody knew about. So look, it was very seamless. It was great. So I decided, I could do 6 months to 8 months in Donegal doing remote work for News Talk. But then when I get to Australia, I'm going to be starting fresh, and I'm going to have no new clients. I'm going to have no new work, and my visa will be very limited anyway while I'm there. So I thought I'll take the 6 months, I'll take the leap, and I'll just try and build myself as an editor. And it's a eye opener. It's a slog, but it's really exciting to see what's out there and what's available. So I've had good lot coming up. So it's going to be a very busy transition to Australia. It'll be interesting with the time differences because some of them are in Ireland and some of them are in America. And I have a few meetings already lined up for Australia, which is great. I was very grateful the Irish Pod Awards were out this year, and being able to announce to prospective clients that I was awarded the podcast editor of the year in Ireland is a lovely thing to kind of lead with.
Yeah, so it adds that level of credibility, particularly when you're coming from abroad and you're looking for meetings in the new country. So then tell us, what services are you offering?
So like what I love to do, like I can offer lots in terms of like consultancy, and I can clean up audio, or I can create intros and outros, bespoke things. But my passion and where I think you get most value out of me is in the long form editing. So I love, as we talked about earlier, the storytelling side of things, being able to take just raw audio and create something kind of more enhanced and give it more kind of let the listener kind of immerse themselves more in the audio. So documentaries, long form podcasts, even I did a few a while back. They were almost similar to this, just talking head interviews, but we kind of sparsed it out with music that would suit the tone, and then some kind of clips to kind of intersperse what they were talking about, just to kind of give the listener a bit of breathing space, so it's not just one long flow. And it actually was really, really nice to do. That stuff was lovely. Just being able to kind of, the last thing you want your listeners to be doing as well is touching their volume, like turn it up or turn it down. So making sure that it's kind of mixed and mastered correctly. And Spotify and Apple and all have their kind of specific kind of audio levels that they expect their audio to be sent in at. So being able to do that is an added benefit, and it just takes that kind of, it just takes the pressure off the podcast creator. That what if this goes on and it gets rejected, or what if it goes on it's too low and people just switch off. So I love just boosting it to like broadcast quality is kind of where I like to put it.
And for anything that you're putting out there, like there's nothing that will turn people off more quickly than if the audio sounds like it was recorded down a well. And like my bugbear when you see in social media are those little influencer mics that, sure, they're cute, but my God, they sound awful. Why are people spending money on them? I don't care that they cost €20. It's a waste of €20. But anyway, that's my rant for another day. Well, Lochlainn Harte, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on Cut Through the Noise. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so I know my name isn't the easiest to spell, so it's LochlainnHarte.com. So LochlainnHarte.com. That's probably the easiest way. Or find me on LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn as well, probably more than I should be, but it's a great place.
I love LinkedIn. It's a fabulous place. It's one of those social media networks that to this day, at least, is still a very friendly place to be. Well, listeners, we will have Lochlainn's links in the show notes. So if you didn't have a pen handy, don't worry, you'll be able to click on them directly there. Lochlainn, thank you so much for joining us on Cut Through the Noise. And of course, to the listener, thank you for staying tuned and supporting the podcast. This is now heading into our second year of the podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with you, and we hope to continue to do so. Don't forget to follow Cut Through the Noise on your preferred podcast platform. Hit that follow button. And if you're feeling really generous, give us a 5-star review. Even on Spotify now, you can comment on individual podcast episodes. And all of that support helps spread the word about Cut Through the Noise and broaden out the reach of the podcast and each and every episode. And remember, while content may well be king, clarity is key to getting cut through the noise and helping you and your brand stand out from the crowd. Here's hoping to a successful 2025, Lochlainn, for the launch of your new venture.
Thank you very much.